In this mini lecture, we're going to talk about nonverbal messages. With nonverbal communication and nonverbal messages, we are sending and receiving messages in a variety of ways without the use of verbal codes or words. Now, nonverbal messages can be intentional and unintentional. Many times we do not realize that we're saying or behaving in a certain way. And as a receiver of nonverbal messages, we do tend to place more meaning on the nonverbal message than on the actual words. For example, if I were to say to you, "Hi, how are you today?" and you said, "Fine," I would probably think that you are fine. But if I said, "How are you today?" and you said, "Fine," I would probably listen to the way that you said that word and interpret the meaning, even though you said the word fine, to be that you're probably not fine. Now, for purposes of this class, we're going to look at two different types of nonverbal messages. We're going to break these down into vocal delivery qualities and physical delivery qualities. We've already talked a little bit about the vocal delivery qualities, but I think we're going to go through those again. And this would be the things that were included in the mini lecture on words and language: pitch, volume, rate, pause, variety, pronunciation, articulation, and also dialect. So just to reiterate, pitch. This is how high or how low your voice is determined by how fast or how slow your vocal cords vibrate. Now, when you're delivering a speech, you want your pitch to have some inflection so that you sound a little more enthusiastic, a little more excited about what you're saying. If you speak in a very monotone voice, and I tell my audience that my topic is exciting, but I really don't sound like I'm that excited about it, then it's going to be very difficult for your audience to attend to your message. So again, we're trying to have some inflection with our pitch. We don't want to be monotone. Volume. This is how loud or how soft your voice is. Again, when delivering a speech, your voice should be slightly louder than your normal speaking voice. Of course, you always need to consider the size and shape of the room when you're determining the volume. And you, of course, want to vary your volume for more enthusiastic delivery. The rate is the speed at which you speak. Now, the average speaking rate is 120 to 150 words per minute. If you speak too fast, the audience will not understand everything you say, and you are more likely to have problems with pronunciation and articulation. But if you speak too slow, you will bore your audience. The key here is to find a nice rate, and the best way to do that is to practice. Pause is using a moment of silence. This can be used to help your audience linger on a thought, to enhance or emphasize a point, or to draw attention to a point. If you've ever watched Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, you will see that he has an effective use of pause throughout his speech. Verbal fillers. This is something that many people say that they have difficulty with. These are the words or sounds, like, you know. So what do we do about verbal fillers? Well, often what's happening with a verbal filler is that our brain is trying to catch up with the information that we want to say. And so the more we practice, the more comfortable we become with our speech, and the less likely we are to use verbal fillers. Now, removing verbal fillers is a process. First, you need to recognize that you use them. You may find that you use them at some parts of your speech more than others. You could always ask a friend or a family member to signal each time you use them, and then with each practice, you should get a little better. You could also record your speech and listen to it. Then you'll have an idea of when you are more likely to use verbal fillers. Vocal variety is where you're fluctuating your pitch, your volume, your rate, and the use of pause. So you could find a speech on AmericanRhetoric.com or YouTube. Perhaps Ronald Reagan's "Tear Down This Wall," Martin Luther King, "I Have a Dream." Listen to any comedian. By listening to different speeches, you will have a better understanding of how seasoned speakers use vocal variety to deliver and emphasize their message. Pronunciation is the standard or commonly accepted way to make a word sound. If you're unsure how to pronounce a word, look it up or ask someone who might know. And if you're using technical language or words that might not be known to the audience, be sure to define them in a way that the audience can understand. Articulation is how completely or clearly you utter a word. Good morning versus good morning. I grew up near Pittsburgh, and so did you eat yet pretty much sounded like "Jeet yet?" Speaking fast, mumbling, running words together, or dropping vowels or consonants, such as in saying drinkin' instead of drinking, are all considered poor speech articulation or enunciation. The final point we want to talk about is dialect. This is how a particular group of people pronounce and use language. Now, dialects in the United States are very regional. We can think of someone who grew up in the South. We could think of Amish English. Oftentimes you don't realize you have a certain dialect until you move away from that place and then return and listen to people who live there speak. Now, if your dialect is significantly different from that of your audience, it can distract them and can decrease your effectiveness. However, you cannot get rid of your dialect completely, but you do want to make sure to define words that might be common to your ethnic or regional group. You do want to perhaps slow down your speech rate a little so that your audience is able to understand. So those are some vocal delivery qualities. Let's look at some physical delivery qualities, things that you should be mindful of while you're delivering a speech. And these behaviors can influence how the audience perceives a message. They include appearance, eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, movement, and posture. So let's first take a look at appearance. This is the way you dress and your grooming choices. Now, we could probably have a lengthy conversation about appearance and how appearance shouldn't matter, but honestly, in today's world and throughout time, it does matter. Now, that doesn't mean you need to dress up for these speeches. Of course, you want to match your dress and the way you groom to the needs of the audience. If you are at Comic-Con and you are presenting a speech at Comic-Con, you would be dressed a certain way. However, if you were delivering a message at church, you would probably be dressed a different way. So you want to be well groomed and certainly dress for the occasion. Use your appearance to support, not detract from your message. You also want to consider environmental issues. If you know that the room is very warm, you might not want to wear a sweater. And think about the mood, the attitude, or the image you want to project. As a general rule, you do not want your appearance to detract from the message that you are trying to convey. Eye contact is something that's very difficult. It's not easy to look into an audience and see a room of 20 or 30 or 100 eyes looking back at you. But you want to try to at least briefly look directly into the eyes of another person or a person in the audience. Now, we need to recognize that eye contact is greatly influenced by culture. In Western culture, we tend to prefer direct eye contact. I'm sure again that you've had a parent say, "Look at me when I'm talking to you." And we tend to judge those who maintain some eye contact as being more credible. Now, when you're delivering a speech to a room full of people, it's best to vary your eye contact around the room. Reading your speech leads to a very boring speech. And so you want to be very comfortable and knowledgeable about your speech content, but you do not want to have it completely written out. You want to be able to make eye contact with your audience. Well, this information about types is taken directly from your textbook, and we do not need to go through everything. But some ineffective eye contact could be the bobber. This is the person who bobs up and down rhythmically from the notes to the audience. The way to make this better is to practice, so you do not need to rely so much on your notes. And there are various other types of eye contact behavior that you could certainly familiarize yourself with. Again, knowing where you may fall in the ways with eye contact will help you adapt, and through practice, you will become a better speaker and be more able to maintain eye contact. The next aspect of physical delivery is facial expressions. This is where we use the facial muscles to convey our internal thoughts or feelings. Now, through numerous research, we've been able to identify that there are about 6 universally recognized expressions. These include happiness, fear, surprise, disgust, anger, and sadness, which means that when people from different cultures look at similar facial expressions, they are able to label them as conveying one of these 6 emotions. Now, for speaking, you want to match your expression to your verbal message. We certainly do not want to avoid or to exaggerate any facial expressions. And when we're speaking across cultures, we want to consider the universality of your expression. It is certainly best to know your audience, and then you can adjust your nonverbal behavior to match. Gestures are when you use your body or parts of it, including your hands, arms, head, and eyes, to convey a message and feeling. Gestures can include emblems, which would be a speech-independent act, such as a thumbs-up sign, or illustrators, which are speech-dependent acts. So, for example, putting up one finger while saying my first point. Effective gestures should vary, be appropriate to the speech, and be purposeful. Movement is the way that you use motion and space during a speech. The use of movement is dependent on your topic, your audience, and the occasion, as well as any limitations of the room. The final aspect of physical delivery to talk about is posture. These 2 images demonstrate a poor example of posture and a good example of posture. This is the way you position your body during your speech. Leaning over or resting your arms, leaning against a wall would all be examples of bad posture. You do want to stand up straight, you want to seem to be a little relaxed, and this makes it more inviting to the audience.